Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay in getting this out there, but here is chapter 2. And we'll go ahead and go through the slideshow. Communication, culture, and work. Chapter 2. First of all, some facts and figures just that the book talks about a little bit. 10,000 foreign companies, first of all, operate in the United States. And if you think about some of those right now, just even some in the Houston area, you can think that Shell Oil is actually a company from Venezuela. There's also the Valero company is not an American company. It's actually a foreign company. In fact, most oil companies are actually foreign companies. You think about products like Sony. Sony is a foreign company that operates outside the United States. Nintendo, for all the video gamers. Well, I guess that works for Sony as well. So there's a lot of different companies that obviously operate in the United States that are foreign, that are actually, they have companies, they have buildings and things here, but they're foreign-owned companies. 25 million workers, that's 15% of the total U.S. workforce, are actually not from the United States. They're not U.S. born. They've come here to work. It's important to know that. It's important to understand that there's different cultures and how different cultures deal with this particular issue. In 2050, 47% of the population will be white. You'll notice that's less than what it is now. So it's just going to continue to lower and lower and lower. 29% Hispanic, 13% black, and 9% Asian. And those numbers, those three, will continuously go up as the years progress. So we're becoming definitely a more diverse workforce, and it's something that you have to think about in terms of culture and how culture works. Not only the culture of people, but also the culture of companies. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So first of all, culture, what is it? It is a learned set of shared interpretations that affect behaviors of a large group of people. That's great. What does that actually mean? What that actually means is that you have beliefs that are not necessarily the same for everybody. You have values that are not necessarily the same for everybody. And you have norms or rules that are not necessarily the same for everybody. And since that's the case, it's important to understand how other cultures view beliefs, values, and norms so that you can adapt to those particular cultures and that they can also adapt to you as well. So it's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street. There's also organizational culture, and I said we were going to talk about that. And it's very interesting because not only do you have your own religious culture or culture of where you're from, nationality, but you also have an organizational culture that gets created. Organizations have their own beliefs, values, and norms, and for how all of those things work. So it's important to understand those as well. So being a part of a diverse society, things that you should understand. Co-cultures. Co-cultures are groups with an identity inside of a main culture. Just to give you an example of this, if you think about the United States as a culture, there are millions of different co-cultures within that. You have video game culture. You have movie culture, sci-fi culture. You have men and women could be considered co-cultures. You have co-cultures broken down based on jobs. You have people who work in police, people who work in the fire department. Those are different cultures. First responders, they have their own culture. You have a co-culture of people who are nerdy. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. So co-cultures are one way that can be broken down. Obviously, race and ethnicity is another way that this can be broken down. And every race and ethnicity has different views of things like silence, how you view silence. American culture, or I shouldn't say, I guess not American culture, but when you think, American culture is not, but it's not race or ethnicity. If you think about races or ethnicities that deal with silence differently, I think you have some impatience. If you look at it in terms of white culture, is very impatient with silence. They don't like silence very much. Hispanic culture is okay with silence at times. It's okay to, be quiet. It's okay to reflect and things like that. So there's some differences there. Differences in conflict and how different races and ethnicities deal with conflict. nonverbal standards, like what types of nonverbals say what in certain situations. And also eye contact is something that's very different. If you look at Asian culture versus say, Hispanic culture is very much about eye contact, whereas Asian culture is very much eye contact is a sign of disrespect. So those are some things that you have to think about. Social class is another diversity issue. There are people obviously in the working class, which would be we would consider blue collar, versus people who work more in the middle or upper class, which we would consider white collar. So you have to look at those different types of approaches and how they view things. Generational differences is something that's huge in the workplace. Baby boomers, those people who are between the ages of 45 and 64, those people who are, not baby boomers, 45 to 64, that's not right, born from 1945 to 1964. These are the people who are, that feel like they have seniority. They also grew up in an age where winning and achievement was important. These are the groups that grew up right after World War II. So dealing with achievement, dealing with, winning things was important for them. Generation X, so anybody from 1965 to 1980. Now, you don't know when I was born, and I'll tell you, because I'm not going to give you my quiz about me in this class. But I was born in 1981, so I'm right off of Generation X, but I would consider myself a member of Generation X. Finding that work-life balance, being able to balance the two and have a life outside of the workplace is something that we definitely definitely struggle with and definitely work towards. And believing that people are people and not organizations. I think that's definitely something that Generation X works towards. I mean, I'm a teacher. My belief is that every student's important and that you should work towards, enriching all of those students. Some generations don't believe that. It's not the case. I mean, I believe baby boomers are not necessarily like that. It's definitely more about the organization than necessarily about the people in the organization. And then you have millennials. Your generation, although this is interesting because this is almost not your generation anymore. These are people who were born from 1980 to the year 2000. And some of you, I'm not sure, I believe some of you were probably born in 99. Some of you 98, 97. So this is actually becoming a generation that we're looking for a name for the next generation. But millennials, very tech savvy, obviously. I mean, you grew up in that tech age. You have to realize that you're in the entry level, but you don't want to be in the entry level. Most millennials who enter the workforce want to be at the top right away. And it's hard for them to learn that, hey, you've got to start at the entry level and work your way up to the top. And some people have been against that. If you look at people like the founder of Facebook, which his name is escaping me right now. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg. I have a friend who's working in the back. But Mark Zuckerberg definitely was a millennial who said, no, I want my company now, and worked his way towards that. But I mean, obviously, that's one case. You have a lot of different cases that are not going to work like that. Very ethnically diverse. It's a workforce that is greatly diverse. Very different ethnicities working around. Half of this generation has passports, and a quarter of this generation expect to work outside the United States. So unlike the past where you grew up in the U.S., you plan on working in the U.S., most now today are like, no, I'm going to go and work in England. Or I'm going to go and work in Asia. I'm going to go and work in Japan or work in China. A lot of people are saying, nope, we're just going to go work overseas because there's more opportunities and different opportunities than there were 10, 20, 30 years ago. But the biggest thing about this generation, and you may disagree with me, but I've seen it, so you can disagree if you want, but I've seen it, is the idea of affirmation. This generation wants to be affirmed all the time. They want affirmation. They want to know that they're doing a good job. They want that affirmation. And that's something that sort of differs from a lot of the other generations where they didn't need people to tell them all the time that they were good enough. This generation needs that. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. I'm just saying this generation definitely wants affirmation that they're doing well. Some other things, regional differences. You see differences in accents and smiling. That's some things you see in regional differences. Disabilities. Some things to think about. Be naturally cordial. Don't just be cordial just because they have a disability. Respect that person. They're not deaf. They're not a child. They may have a disability that affects, some certain cognitive abilities and things like that. But you have to realize that they are not those things that you are planting your mind into. You have to respect that person. You can't be pushy. You always want to accommodate to the disability. If somebody has a broken leg, or somebody is in a wheelchair, you don't treat them as if they're 12 years old or 2 years old or 3 years old. You treat them as they're an adult, and you accommodate to the disability. You help them with a ramp. You help them with an elevator, those types of things. Be very patient and also relax. Relax around people with disabilities. They're just normal human beings like you and I. They just happen to have a disability. International business, customs and behaviors, some different things. If you look at formality, Americans are very informal when it comes to business. We're not, you see dinner meetings, you see meetings at, restaurants, you see meetings over alcohol, things like that. That's the American type of way of dealing with business. It's very informal. It's not as together, or not as formal, I should say, as other countries. You see business meetings in places like Germany. You see business meetings in places like Japan, and you see more formal types of business. It's interesting. If you ever go to Walmart in Germany, they do not have greeters at Walmart in Germany. They feel it's disrespectful to greet customers at the Walmart fronts in Germany. So they don't actually have Walmart greeters. It's very interesting. Some social customs. Greetings. You have to be aware of greetings. You have to be aware of gift giving. In some cultures, it's important to give gifts. It's important to graciously receive gifts. Denying a gift would be seen as disrespectful. So those are some things you have to think about. And then also socializing. What types of socializing are appropriate and inappropriate in certain business settings if you're doing international business. Style and dress, also important. Conservative obviously goes further. It's important to be conservative when you're dressing. So don't wear a purple suit coat, guys. Don't go in like the 17 color dresses. Probably not a good idea. You want to go more conservative, things like black, brown, those conservative colors. Time. The time is different in different cultures, and especially in business. If you go down to Mexico, Mexico deals with time very differently. You may have a meeting set to start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that may not start until 7 or 8 in the evening, because there are things, the family is more important in Mexico, and there's other things that are pressing, and just because you have a meeting set up at a certain time doesn't mean that that's when it actually happens. It's very polychronic, as opposed to American time, which is very monochronic. It's always follow the schedule to a T, one thing at a time, and it's very different. Dealing with conflict is something that a lot of international business is interested in. The difference between harmony versus disharmony. Some cultures are very tolerant of disharmony. Some are not, and you have to be aware of those. Gender roles. Some cultures view gender very differently than other cultures. The United States says that obviously we're equal, and we should be, but that wouldn't necessarily be the case in some business culture, as you may see, and I don't agree with that, but that's something that you will see in the workplace. Other cultures definitely diminish a female role, and some cultures actually make female roles higher than male roles. So those are some things you have to think about in terms of titles, ranks, things like that. Pay attention to those things with international business. So some other dimensions, and I'm not going to go in depth with these. You can read about these. These will help you out a little bit more, but high versus low context. How much information is read from nonverbals versus language. Individualistic versus collectivistic. Obviously, some cultures care more about individuals and individual success compared to group success. High versus low power distance. How close can you get to people? High versus low uncertainty avoidance. How much can you leave on the table versus not leave on the table? So how much uncertainty can groups and cultures deal with? And then long-term versus short-term orientation. Who cares about today versus who cares about tomorrow? Those are things you have to think about. Let's talk about ethics really quickly. Ethical response to diversity issues. You can avoid the issue, which you should refuse to do in business and cultures that operate on a different set of ethics. So if you think that the ethics are there, you avoid them. Accommodating, so you maybe conform to another culture's set of ethics. Forcing, try to get the other culture to conform to your ethics. And there's some ethical issues there too. Educating or persuading, so convincing the other culture that your ethics are better. Again, maybe some ethical issues there. Negotiating and compromising, trying to get both parties to give up something. And then there's also collaboration or problem solving. What you always should try to strive for is coming to a decision together that benefits everyone. So helping everybody out with ethics and with any type of ethical issues that might come up. Some last things. Communicating across diversity. Become culturally literate. Read up on where you're going. If you're in business and you're going to another culture, read up on it. Don't just go and assume that it's going to be the same, because it's not. Develop constructive attitudes. View diversity as an opportunity to learn. View it as an opportunity to get to know another culture. View it as an opportunity to grow yourself. And avoid ethnocentrism. Don't believe that your culture is the most important. Believe that all cultures are equal and the same. Don't be ethnocentric. Adapt your behavior. Don't condescend. Don't talk down to people. And create a dialogue. Talk about diversity. It's not a taboo issue. It's okay to discuss diversity issues. It's okay to say, it's not okay to joke about it. It's not okay to do things like that. But it's okay to have a conversation about diversity and about differences to learn and to grow. That's it for Chapter 2. I will talk to you soon. Have a good day, everybody.